You're back from Japan. Are you groggy at all? Are you jet lagged?
I keeps getting pushed back further and further. So the day I got back, it was like 1 p.m. I was like ready to go to sleep.
Yep.
Now it's like 8 p.m. I'm ready to go to sleep, which was
back's
hard
the worst.
trying to watch this episode last night.
I bet. I'm John Tatey, joined by Gus Spellman, as always, to talk about Better Call Saul. It's the third episode of the second season. I didn't look up the title beforehand.
Amarillo.
Oh, thank you. Okay. It's called Amarillo. I'm getting a sense from you guys that you were not especially impressed by this episode.
I mean, maybe it's just because I was tired and jet lagged while I was watching it, but I didn't find a lot to really grab onto in this episode.
It was not the liveliest episode.
No,
certainly
definitely not. But I also think that this was also just like, not one of the better episodes of Better Call Saul.
I don't really think of it necessarily in terms of good or bad when I'm doing this. I'm not saying that to be annoying. I really I think of it in terms of interpretation and in terms of the characters. And on that note, we have an interesting comment.
Yeah.
Comments are back.
Comments are back. Tobias Lehigh Nagy, I hope I pronounced it all right. He said that Kim was surprisingly clueless this episode.
Clueless?
He is referring to the fact that she just sort of believes Jimmy when he shows her the commercial, like that he thinks she should have been a little more skeptical, because usually Kim is pretty on it and like pretty good at calling Jimmy out, when he does something
As
that
she
seems
does
like,
in this episode, right?
Yeah. We expect her to know better, and it was a little weird that she didn't. And I kind of think that the way that they dialed Kim's character here is part of the reason that I was not super... There's one of the reasons that this episode didn't quite work for me. In this first scene, after they have the meeting at HHM, she's like scolding Jimmy and sets herself at a distance from him, literally, with the foot thing.
Right.
And then the next scene that we have with them together, she's like, oh, these balls in your house, that's so funny. And they seem to be on totally good terms.
I think you can either say, well, she's unrealistically clueless here, or you can accept it. And I, as a critic, always try to say, okay, what if I accept the reality? What does that tell me here? The takeaway is that Kim is trying, despite herself, to believe Jimmy has turned over a new leaf or has turned away from his sort of shady strategies.
Yeah, maybe, but you can't help the fact that that's incongruous with her reaction in the first scene.
No, you can't.
And the cynical part of me says they gave her this reaction because they wanted Jimmy to be in a deeper hole when it turns out that this commercial bid of his did not work out. Her reaction of saying I can't believe they went for it, forces him not to contradict her. And so now he's caught not only in putting this commercial out there without permission, which was a bad idea, but also in lying to Kim. So they're trying to up the stakes, but they're doing it in a way that's cheating by giving one of their characters a reaction that I just don't buy.
Okay, that's a compelling case, I have to say. As long as we're talking about Kim, I want to share something that we have in the notes here as John's crazy threes theory, which is fair enough, but I'm gonna tell you something I've noticed. Whenever Kim and Jimmy have a scene in the parking garage, there's this light that comes in that very intensely highlights the number 3. And my interpretation of this has always been that it evokes this third wheel feeling where there's always this other force sort of hovering and intruding on their relationship. I think Chuck is kind of the third outside hovering force in this scene that they have on the stairs, which is not on the parking garage, except lo and behold, once again, there is a 3 in the background because the sign on the, don't laugh, the sign on the wall says 3rd floor. This is too much to be a coincidence, Gus. I think that the show is subtly encouraging us to think about threes and to think about the third force outside this relationship that should work, that's making it not work.
I think the fact that we wrote it down as crazy threes theory will tell you what I think of this. I will admit that it definitely seems that there's like a pattern that they're putting in here, but I think that this is the road too frequently traveled for me, like drawing too much interpretation out of something like this. Like,
that's crazy. That's so wrong.
I think that it's not like some of the other things that we talk about on the show where you can say like, they did this and it has this effect on the viewer. And I just I'm as you know, I'm not super comfortable going to the other side Go,
I don't
crossing
know what the
over
other side is.
It's the dark side. It's the side
It's
of
not the dark
interpretation.
side. That's complete horseshit. Oh my God, interpretation. I don't know what we're doing here if it's not
Analysis.
interpretation.
Analysis for me is cause and effect. Look at the effect that something had on me and figure out how that effect was accomplished. And interpretation is looking at the ideas that something put in your head. It all gets, and I'm not saying that you are navel gazing, but I'm saying that general practice results in a lot of navel gazing. I don't know why I felt the need to point to my navel.
You want to err on the side of not interpreting things, even when they're clearly significant, like the threes are. And I'm saying that's silly. It's fine to err on the side of looking for meaning, of looking for significance, because there's a built-in self-correcting mechanism in that the work will not bear it out if you're trying to impose an interpretation that really is not fruitful in this narrative world. Okay, like once you interrogate the show with that theory, if it's a lousy theory, you're not going to get anything back from it. And that to me is why it's okay to put something out there, to put an idea out there. It stokes conversation, it gives you ideas. These are all good things to me.
Okay, so let me ask you a question theoretically. Let's say that this scene had happened between them and there was a 4.
Yeah.
Like, would you have said like, oh, my theory is no good now?
No, because there still would have been a number of scenes with that 3 blazingly highlighted. But I think that the fact that we have now another 3 and another scene between Jimmy and Kim.
I agree that it makes it more compelling.
Right.
Definitely. Yeah.
What should we talk about next, Gus?
Let's talk about some analysis stuff. Let's talk about some filmmaking choices that.
Okay, I think we have been. Analyzing and talking about filmmaking choices, but okay, go ahead.
You wanted to point out the camera move.
Yeah, my favorite camera move in this episode is set up by this conversation about the dolly when they're shooting the commercial. And then we see the old lady coming down on her stair chair, a callback to last season, and we see Jimmy frame it, right? That classic director move of framing it. What I love about it is you have to sort of think about where the camera is watching the commercial, right? You have to sort of realize, oh, the only way they could have gotten that shot is on the stair chair. And that camera move gives you insight into Jimmy's improvisational talents, right? Because what a beautiful way to solve that problem of needing this sort of professional feel and not having the right equipment for it.
Yeah, it's so interesting, because you pointed this out before with the taping, how many references to various pieces of like pop culture or art there are in this episode. And it's like, they really kind of give Jimmy control of the cinema in this a little bit, the filmmaking inside the filmmaking. It's just like very like, it's not really like fourth wall breaking, but it's definitely a little bit self-reflexive.
Yeah,
I think that they give him the power, they give him power over that by like knowing the references, but also by, controlling the frame, and then you see the camera move that he created out of that. And I think it just helps you it just like makes you root for him a little bit more. You're just like so on his side with this commercial. I can't think of any other thing.
Because you're impressed by the clever.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because other commercials that we've seen Jimmy do, both in Better Call Bad and Breaking Bad, and the commercials from last season, you think like, oh, this is silly, or this is stupid, or this is garish. And this one, you're kind of like, even though it's very cheesy, you're totally on board with him and how he made it. And maybe it's a little window into what might have been if Jimmy had stayed on the good side and used all these talents that we know he has.
That's one of the essential tensions in Jimmy's being, is that the Chuck-pleasing part of him, sure, would like to go through the proper patient motions of lawyering, but he sees how potent it could be with this entertainment sensibility.
He's also, I think, a little bit afraid of rejection of that. Let's talk about another camera move from this episode where he's walking over with the tape to show it to Clifford.
Yeah, this is a subtler move here, and the camera is sort of a physical embodiment of Jimmy's state of mind here, because I love how it follows him with some momentum as he's headed toward Clifford's office, and then he pauses and the camera turns to peek in as he does. And what interests me here is that the camera pivots back before Jimmy turns around. And to me, I think you can feel in the camera move the tide turning in Jimmy's mind before the thought comes to fruition with him. I mean, that's just great directing to give you that really subtle feel of the character's state of mind.
Yeah, there's a lot of subtle things, I think, in this episode. Do you want to talk about the sound mix in that scene with Chuck?
Here's an instance of great sound mixing where throughout this scene, you can hear the crinkling of Chuck's stupid electromagnetic foil suit he's got on underneath his business suit, right?
Which they don't even show you. For the first time, they don't make a big deal about him putting it on so that you see it, but it's still
Good
there.
point.
Yeah,
we
yeah.
just know it's there from past episodes. And the crinkling, to me, again, talking about evoking the state of mind, like it just so beautifully embodies the effect that Chuck has on Jimmy. It's just this sort of nagging, like, it just makes you itchy to even hear it. And that's how Chuck must feel to Jimmy, don't you think?
Really astonishing results, Jimmy. Incredible. Your last trip to Amarillo?
It definitely heightens
irritation.
the discomfort in this scene, you know?
Yeah. Let's wrap up with a note on the credits. And you and I fought about this before taping because you didn't believe me, but I proved it, that in the first season, we're seeing the same images in the second season credits. In fact, in the same order.
Yeah.
But what I noticed is that we get these flickers of black and white in the season 2 opening sequence that we do not get in the first season. I feel like maybe Vince Gilligan et al. Are trying to keep in mind Saul's eventual downfall. I feel like we're watching the rise of Saul in earnest in this season. Could be wrong about that. That's what I said last season. But I feel like we're watching the rise of Saul, and the black and white we've seen used for these segments,
Right, we've talked about this a
these
little bit.
present day
Yeah,
segments, right? So I think the introduction of black and white into the credits is to just sort of plant the seed of the end of this narrative, where we know this all ends up.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. This is the kind of thing that's really hard to make like a very confident assertion about until like you see them do it. Like we'll have to see what they do in the third season. Like maybe they just decided, oh, they're more visually appealing this way, which I actually think that they are.
With the black and white
With the
flicker?
black and white, yeah. But it also, I mean, it could just be, you know, highlighting the distinction, you know, between present and and future.
Yeah.
You know, like that we talked about in our first episode with the colors standing out a little
That's
more
right.
this season.
That's right.
You know,
Let's wrap up with Clifford Baines. You
Yeah.
thought Clifford
It was-
Baines' name was Clifford Baines.
driving me crazy. And then somebody in the comments for our last polite fight, Admirable, pointed out that Clifford Baines is the name of a character from an Onion show in the Know, which is my favorite Onion show.
The perpetually unseen Clifford Baines.
Right, which must be where that came from in
Yeah,
my
yeah,
mind
yeah.
and why it felt so right to me. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you for solving that
Admiral
mystery
Admirable.
of
It was
why.
driving me
Because he was like,
crazy.
no, it's Clifford Baines. We had to fast forward through it, and I had to play it for him to make him believe me. Thanks for the assist on that one, and thank you for watching Polite Fight. For Gus Spellman, I'm John Tatey. We'll see you next week. So long for now.
Bye.